whenever we're talking about someone else, we need to exercise an immense amount of empathy when we're talking about what they went through or why they did what they did.
We have to ask questions. We can't stop asking questions. And when we stop asking questions, we become to a really dangerous crossroads. How do you be the friend that people just know no matter what happens, we're always going to be friends?
I think sometimes it's internal where...
You're listening to the Mind Shift podcast. I'm here with my dad, Erwin McManus. My name is Erwin McManus. How you doing today, Dad?
I'm doing good. I think you're using the word "I'm here" in a very metaphorical term because you are in Miami, Florida right now, and I'm in Los Angeles, California. So we're literally as far apart in the U.S. as we can be.
So far apart, yet so close together. It's kind of beautiful. I'm honestly not the biggest Miami fan, but it's beautiful out here. It's stunning today. It's like really nice. I'm off the water. It's warm, but I'm enjoying it. One thing, I got on the plane yesterday to come here, and I ran into a guy who, like, within 2 to 3 minutes on being on the plane, I think I just put myself up on the plane, about to sit in my seat. This young guy named Ryan comes up and says, "Hey, man, I love your podcast. I listen to you guys all the time."
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was very cool, and we ended up talking, and kind of at the end, when I was getting off the plane, so I was just pulling up his IG. But yeah, no, he was in town doing a shoot, so it was kind of cool. But yeah, it's always fun to like meet people and see people and run into people, and I think we have like the coolest listener audience, and
it was very cool. Yeah. Now, my favorites when we were in our little hole-in-the-wall sushi restaurant, and I think it's a Japanese server came up and said that she loved the podcast.
Yes, that was a we made it moment.
Yeah.
I was losing it. But yeah, my favorite local sushi spot. It was so sick. It's good to be in Miami too. We got to do something here. It's kind of nice here. You grew up here, didn't you?
I lived there for 10 years of my life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Went to Southwest Miami High School.
What?
I went to Southwest Miami High School.
It's crazy. That's really crazy. So we've been coming off of like a really what feels like a never-ending January, February, and now we're in the 11th of March. Like, where did this even go? How are we even a week and a half into this month? And I feel like it's already almost over. We're talking about it like it's over. We had a couple cool things happen at the end of last month. We have a community called The Arena, which is our community of communicators, leadership development, and self-mastery and character, which is a really amazing space. So we've been doing these once a month summits. We've been selling tickets a la carte. I think it's $150 per event, or like a $1,200 membership, which is kind of cool. There's like a cheaper way of jumping into the arena and offering kind of a part of the community experience that we have. But we had one with Edwin Oyave. Oh, I said his name right for the first time ever. I always call him Oyagave, which is so ridiculous. I don't know why. Because agave is sugar, I don't, and he's sweet.
That's because the half Irish part of you is your tongue.
It's my tongue. But anyways, he did our last summit. It was really special, really wonderful. And we have our next summit with Ali Webb, who is also speaking at our conference in October, which is really exciting. So if you haven't joined us for those, you should join us.
So Ali's going to be with us on March 27th.
March 27th.
Specifically at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. She's the founder of Dry Bar, and she's going to talk about, her entrepreneurial journey. It's going to be an incredible conversation. We're going to dive into some really granular, aspects of her decision-making process and get all the good learning we can out of it. So, I was with some people yesterday, and they were just talking to me about how much they love like cold plunges and how it just resets your body and makes you younger and makes you healthier and all that kind of stuff. And so I was thinking, our summits are cold plunges. They're like a fast, deep dive into leadership, development, into, moving toward optimal performance. And so if you're looking for a mental cold plunge, dive into the Arena Summits once a month, and they'll be invigorating and life-changing.
Amazing. Yeah, no, I'm very excited to have this next one. Okay, Dad. So we had the Mosaic Conference, and then we just released our last episode of Mind Shift, and we did that live at the Mosaic Conference. But I can't avoid the matter of fact, right? we released an episode the Friday morning of conference, as we normally do. And then we happened to be shooting a live episode that afternoon. And in between releasing it and shooting the next one, I was already very nervous. But, I said some things on the last podcast, that we've since then, I think, bleeped out or edited out to a certain degree. I think we left the overall conversation on there. But for the most part, we maybe hit a little too close to home and talking about some friends and, some situations we went through. But, I apologize to the person for saying what I said and being a part of the conversation. But, and I said, hey, I'll apologize to anyone. Like, I have no problem apologizing if I hurt someone's feelings. It doesn't mean that what I said wasn't true. And not to double down on it, but I do want to have a conversation, Dad, about like, how do we draw the line between bringing real conversations that are personal, but also being respectful and careful of other people's feelings and in that space, because obviously I don't want to be disrespectful and I don't want to be reckless, but I do feel a lot of these things, and I do think people don't mind being reckless with us. So how do we balance it, right? Not to go back on it, not to bring too much light to it, but
Well, I think one real clear line is I think it's perfectly acceptable to talk about an action or a decision or something that's concrete. I think you cross the line when you impose your knowledge of a person's motive or what they were thinking or their intention behind it. And so I think that's one thing. It's easy to do when you go, oh, this person did this, which would be completely true, and I think it's fair game. But then when you go, they did this because of this, then I think that you're moving into speculation. Once you're talking about why a person did something, you can ask why, but when you say it as if it's fact, you're now moving into your interpretation of their motive is as factual as the recognition of the action.
yeah.
And I do think that's an important line because
I don't know if I agree with you, but I agree to some sense, but I also do think that, like, to some standard, right? We're public figures, and these other people are public figures, and if you put yourself out there on a podcast, on the internet, to some degree, you are a public figure. So there's some things that are off limits, and there's some things that aren't, right? You can always make the excuse that everything's off limits or that everything's on, right? I wasn't talking about this, and that's where it was. I think it was a little too personal with the reference of who we were, of what we were talking about, and who were the leaders there, and that I think is complicated, and I've got to work through that and being better at that. But I do think, if someone came out and said, "I know this thing about a relationship that you had," and blah, 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 I go, "That's kind of off limits. It's personal. It's private. XYZ." And that's where I think I may have messed up.
yeah, it's just like when someone asks you, why did you guys break up? Like, there could be like 15 reasons why you break up. But somebody might go, oh, it's because of this. And they just pick one reason and they act like that's the singular reason. And so in some sense, it's a misrepresentation of the whole. And I think that's where you have to be careful because, when you're vamping and you're talking, and it's easy to make something that's singular sound like it's everything when it's one of the things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so it's just a mix of things, and so I mean I can imagine like if I suddenly transitioned out of Mosaic, like I'm no longer the lead pastor of Mosaic, I can't even imagine the hundreds of things people would say about why, even right now, if it just and it may just be that, oh, I've been doing it for 30 years and it's time to create space for someone else. That may be my thinking, but it could also be a lot of other things, right? It could be 10 other things, but someone else, they pick up one thing out there in the universe, right? And then they go, okay, no, that's why he's making the decision. Even right now, the fact that I'm just using it as an example, someone will go, oh, Erwin McManus is leaving Mosaic, even though I'm just using it as an example. And they'll go, you see, I told you there's some. And when someone wants to find a problem, they'll find a problem.
Yeah,
And I
there's
think,
always problems, whether it's a great place, a good place, or a bad place. Like there's just always problems. Nothing is ever perfect and exactly how it seems on the outside.
so. I just think that whenever we're talking about someone else, we need to exercise an immense amount of empathy when we're talking about what they went through or why they did what they did. And sometimes it's easier to cut through that when you're just trying to get to the bottom line.
Yeah, and I do think that like I the our friend is definitely not wasn't the target of that conversation.
No,
It
at
was
all.
the prophetic weird DM thing that I got. And actually that friend reached out and I haven't responded to that person. I need to respond and I will. But it was like the middle of conference and the interesting thing is I think our one friend does listen. I don't think the other friend does. I think it's just people who send things and clips and whatever and everything out of context. But my friend was like, "Hey, I apologize for the DM," and I hadn't even gotten the chance to respond. But I'm gonna talk to him because I'm gonna go, "Hey, man, like I meant every word I said. Like you shouldn't have sent that. You gave someone access to me that shouldn't have access, and I'm not an inaccessible person. I'm pretty accessible. Most people who want to DM me can DM me or message me or get my number or come to a conference or say hi. Like I've put my number out there so many times. Like there's ways of getting to each other in a modern era. And so yeah, I don't know. So anyways, I don't want to hurt people's feelings. I also do want to talk about real hard things too. So it's like how
Yeah.
do you do both, and how do you do both well, and so I don't want to be light of it. I don't want to just I don't
Yeah.
want
I
to
just think that we have to, be true to ourselves. And, if we don't share what we really think, there's no point in having a podcast. And I actually think I'm overly restrained and we're trying to be incredibly sensitive to people. And yet some people feel like I've been really hard on them, you know, and,
yeah
I'm going, oh, you don't really know how hard I want to be.
yeah
And I said something Sunday in my talk at Mosaic. And even as I was saying it, I thought, uh, that's going to create some challenges.
what'd you say?
I just talked about the psychological dysfunction of people who pretend that they speak in tongues, and that it's because it's easier to pretend you have a spiritual gift than it is to change your character. And so I made some basic statement like that, and I usually try to be a little more rounded in my conversations, but I just think that I'm so tired of the shrapnel effect of just weird, unhealthy Christianity, and then letting and then having that projection be what I have to deal with when I am actually talking about something I care about deeply, which is who Jesus is. And so but if we don't talk about the unhealth in the way faith and spirituality is expressed in Christianity, how are we going to ever get healthy? And so that's a part of it for me.
Yeah, I mean, I got a text in the morning as we were prepping for the pod from a friend, and it was like, I really, I don't know. It was a corrective word, and my initial response was, "You have my number. Why are you DMing me?" And two, like for someone who wants to show support, you live 5 minutes away, come to church or come hang out. Like you can call me and I will listen because we have that kind of friendship. Whether it's a close friendship or not, there's someone who I do respect. And we edited some of the content and we changed some stuff and we made adjustments. But even then, like because we got some comment. This is the thing that hurt was that people loved the pod and it was firing off like right away. And so I was like, frick, and like we're getting comments. People were really backing, like, hey, I'm glad someone talked about this. We were getting a lot of comments that were like, I disagree with you, but I love that we're talking about this. Like, I love that we're bringing this to the table. And I like that probably more than anything else. I don't want you to blindly agree with us, especially not me.
And actually, one of the things that's interesting is whenever you say something that's true, it feels incredibly controversial in the moment. And then later on, people go, oh, that's not that controversial anymore. Because, I mean, if you look back and you go, if you want to bring a hodgepodge of things, like, when we're talking about, the irrationality of the quarantine, the political manipulation of the vaccine, the exaggeration of the impact of COVID, the questionable integrity, no, not even questionable, the lack of integrity of the BLM movement. Like, these are all things that when you say those in those moments, people get really upset and they feel like you're being political or you're taking one side. And then later on, you're looking back and going, oh, it's not that controversial now. Everybody knows these things are true.
That is wild. The CDC pulled its or changed its like memorandum around like how to process and treat COVID protocol and everything. And I'm like, that is we were saying this from day one. There has to be some level of not repercussion, because I don't need to see anyone like burn at the stake for it, but there has to be some level of like, we messed this up for a lot of people. We overreacted for a lot of people.
Yeah, but I just looking back, even just in terms of the structure of the cultural conversation, is that when you say something that, to me, like for me in that whole season, and that's why I remember that's when you told me, "Hey, Dad, you're going way too far right when you're normally way too far left on these things," and I'm like, it's just obvious. I just want to look at things and go, what, at least from my perspective, appears to be true. What doesn't match reality, and what are the things that, where I at least feel, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like I'm being manipulated, or I'm being coerced, or I feel like I'm not being told the truth. And I want that to be what we talk about in the podcast. Even if later we have to go, wow, I was wrong.
We were wrong.
But at least I'm sharing with you in real time what my gut's telling me, what my instincts are telling me. And I think it's okay. See, I think it's okay to be wrong, and sincerely wrong, because then it elevates the conversation, because someone then who has more information, someone who has maybe a better perspective or has insider data, they can come in and go, oh, no, you think this, but this is going on. And for me, that's just a teachable moment. But if you don't at least question, the moment we stop questioning, I think then we're in danger as a society, as a culture, and we'll have diminished thinking. And that's why I do think, by the way, that historically, like schools that are considered elite oftentimes do not create the best thinkers in the world. And because they actually develop a culture of institutionalization, and they reinforce the status quo. And the world is not being changed by Ivy League graduates. And the world is being managed by Ivy League graduates. And you have to realize that most innovation, most pioneering, intellectual creativity, and exploration is actually happening by people who are on the fringes, and they're considered dangerous, or they're considered, heretical, or unorthodox, and we have to pay attention to those things. It's amazing to me now that we're having a lot more even conversations about hydrogen-based automobiles, where that has been something that's been real for so many decades. And it's weird that every person who creates one ends up dying tragically. And, water-based, cars. And I'm going, that's a fun little conspiracy theory. And, but, now they're talking about it for the first time. There's just so many things, the Biden mandate, and I guess, Gavin Newsom's mandate of moving fully electrical by 2035? Is that the year? We all know that's impossible. We all know that is not humanly possible. It's not possible based on technology. It's not possible based on infrastructure. And so I just look at so many things in culture. It's political, it's economic, it's relational, it's social. And I'm like, why is it that we're acting like these things are valid? And it can be in so many different arenas of life. And if I can shift it to one other area, and then I'm going to go back to you. But I heard this expert, everybody's an expert now on narcissism. And she was talking about how, she's had I don't know, half a dozen different narcissistic relationships. And then she said, you don't forgive them. And I'm listening to this going, yeah. And she's going, yes, you never forgive a narcissist. The only way you can get past it, the only way you can get whole or healthy or healed is to never forgive them. And I'm sitting there going, I just know fundamentally that's not true. And even when it's a narcissist, even when a person is the worst human being, if you don't forgive, you don't get better. You don't ever find healing. That forgiveness is not for them. It is really for you. And so I listen to so much stuff out in the environment, but there isn't ever a lot of pushback of going, I mean, let's think through this and fundamentally and ask the question, is this true? Does this work? And I think it's going to be more and more real, Aaron, because with social media and the expansion of communication vehicles.
I think you brought up a couple of good points. I think you brought up the fact that we have to ask questions. We can't stop asking questions. And when we stop asking questions, we come to a really dangerous crossroads. You talked about it on the last episode. You said that you talked about belief systems, and the political viewpoint that you buy into, and that what happens when we don't actually ask questions and evolve in the way that we think. If we don't change the way we're thinking, that there must be either a deep, like, religious reason, or we're just not deep thinkers. And I do think that's a scary thing, right? And it brought up a great conversation with you and I, because we ended up really kind of attacking, okay, what kind of product do we create in the different communities that we have, whether it's Mosaic, whether it's the Arena, whether it's Mindshift, and what is that? And would people judge us by the product? Because that was really our conversation, is this type of thinking is a product of a specific, like, place, right? And so it's the culmination of teaching and leadership and cultural values, and also the variable that humans can just be weird. They came in weird and they left weird, and we have those. And I imagine there's people. Yeah, it breaks my heart. It makes me very sad when I find out that people who were here, whether they're interns or their staff, or they were, I had interns at Venice that did some shady things afterwards, and it always sucks. I thought it was really interesting. This last week, it popped off like crazy on the internet that Joe Rogan had a guest that ended up getting arrested for, like, killing someone, like serial killer style, I think in New York. And he was on Joe Rogan's podcast. All these people are going, okay, well, Joe Rogan pulled the episode. Will he apologize? What will he say? And, like, Joe Rogan had nothing to do with it. He just, he platformed someone. And so there's obviously some level of social responsibility, but not necessarily. He can't control his actions. He didn't go tell him to do something. He was just listening to him and interviewing him and having a conversation. We can't be responsible for everyone's actions, but how do we be responsible for things that we can actually be responsible for, right? So maybe a better way in the future is us just kind of maybe listing out our thesis of beliefs. So this specific viewpoint, this is how we feel about spiritual gifts, this is how we feel about this type of culture or leadership, how we're creating our own culture and leadership, and why we think this might be more advantageous or more helpful to people.
Yeah. And one of the great challenges you have when you're part of a church, especially if you lead one, is that people think you should be responsible for every single person's actions in that church. And as if you didn't know that the church was full of messed up, broken, dysfunctional
humans.
People. And of course it is. That's why we're there. And then you go, yeah, but I went there, and there's a lot of broken people. Okay, where do you want them to be?
What do you mean? You go to Target, there's broken people in Target.
Yeah. And when you go to the movie theater, you're surrounded by broken people. The only difference is the church is actually trying to help people become whole.
See, I think the movie theater is far more terrifying to be in than church. Especially our church. It's all white. It's light inside. It's pretty.
No, it's not all white.
Yes, it is.
The building is.
The building is. The church. White people scare me more than anyone else.
I want to clarify. Our church is multi-ethnic. We have people.
I didn't say white people, Dad.
No, you said our church is all white. Someone's going to go, oh, it says
you
all
didn't
white.
Let me finish my sentence. You go to a movie theater and it's black. It's dark. It takes more trust to sit in the dark. Think about it. It's the craziest thing we do as humans. We sit in the dark with other humans we don't know and watch something. That's so weird.
Yeah.
No, so we just do interesting things. So, here we go.
I just remind myself the world is broken, and some of them are in the church. And and the world is dangerous, and some of them are in the church. And but at least to me, at least when people are in the church, they're trying to become better human beings. They're in a place where they're trying to improve themselves. Why is it? Speaking of that, some gyms everyone's healthy. Like you're like you go, wait a minute. Why is it some gyms everyone's already jacked, and some gyms everyone's already in perfect shape? Where are all the people like me who need a gym because we're not in perfect shape? you know, and because you ever just feel embarrassed going to the gym, going, I can't, I can't go to the gym until I'm gym worthy.
Well, this is like the funny thing. Like I feel like sometimes when I got to go work out for 2 weeks before I go and work out with someone else. I'm like, I need the ramp up to be able to work out. So I'm just not dying in front of everyone because it's not fun to suffer in front of people.
Yeah. Well, I need the gym for the people who need a gym before they can go to the gym. And maybe the church is like the gym that you go to before you're ready for the gym. It's like, and this is where you go when you're not in shape yet. This is where you go when you're not healed yet. And then you also have to make it a place where it's the gym for people who really look like they're in the gym. Because I want the church to be a place where it's for people who are they need the gym, and I want it to be a church where people want to move to optimal performance, and they're not just trying to get healthy; they're athletes. And just realizing life is about progress, and and for all of us there are stages in the evolution of growth. And when you try to act like everyone's in the same place, you're creating an unrealistic expectation, and you can't even live up to it. And so that to me is a part of why we do what we do, a part of why this podcast is so important. We're trying to be honest about how growth happens, how change happens, and that's messy.
And I think it's really interesting, and this is an easy caveat into or segue into the arena because I think the arena is really unique because Mindshift is a platform where we really get to go like, hey, look, here is what we're cooking up. These are the things that we're thinking of. This is the cloud of ideas and conversation, and we're from that cloud we pull things, concepts that formulate, and we bring them to the arena and we discuss them and we gestate and we have these moments where people are able to ask their questions and investigate and really have real conversations. So I do find that these communities are more important than anything else. I find that even whether because the church is one thing, right? And I love being a part of it, though I don't know if it's always like the method in which I love to connect with people. But I do also find that like it's having some sense of community outside of family and with family, it's whether it's integrated, is something that's so essential to being human. It's something that's so essential to life. Like you can tell when someone hasn't been around people for a while. There's a fragility. There is an openness, right? I have a friend going through a really hard time. We were on the phone right before I jumped on here, and and the first thing he's apologized for not being around. And I was like, wait. Like I said, attendance isn't the prerequisite for our friendship. And he was saying like church and life and friendship.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think sometimes, correlate with church just because of we go a lot and we're
yeah.
there and we're part of it. But I'm like, I think that's such and I was like, no, you just need people, man. Like your people didn't leave you. You had a season of life where you weren't around. That's okay. That's, I don't think it's the best, but I'm not bringing it's on the forefront of my mind. So you don't need to apologize for the things that are on the forefront of yours, because I think we go through hard times. We start apologizing for all the things that got us to the place, right? And it's just
Yep.
like sometimes you can't calculate or predict the future well enough to know that some things are just going to happen to you. We had this conference, which was exhausting, and it almost took Austin's life. He's over there with a sinus infection.
He's still on oxygen.
Oxygen, yeah. And I feel like I hadn't slept in like a month. Dad, you must have been exhausted. We had people in town, and I did the thing, man. I did the thing. I barely sat in any sessions, but every free time I was out there saying hi, shaking hands, kissing babies, giving hugs. And my whole reasoning is, if you spend some time with it, if you spend money to spend time, like, you come to LA and you want to come and see what we do, I have all the time in the world for you, as much time as I can, you know? And then on Wednesday, the day after everybody left, we had to put our sweet, beautiful dog down that we've had for 13 years. And then mom's getting arrested, almost getting arrested in Indonesia. And like, and you didn't sleep for like 2 days because you're up on the phone with lawyers trying to like make sure they don't get arrested and thrown in some, Indonesian prison. And so it does feel that like life never lets up. So having spaces like community, it's like getting like it's like one of those scenes where the character has to go in the water to hide, and he has all these straws, and he's like, each person is like one of those straws. You just get a little bit more air and a little bit more life and a little bit more uh, input, and you can share the burden. And I don't know if it's been a thing for you, Dad. I know I'm talking a lot, but I feel like that's been a theme in my life, is like, who are the friends, or the theme in the last couple of weeks of my life has been, who are the friends that share the burden with you, right? Not just the people who are around. It's, you always notice the people who are around when things are good, right? But who are the friends that are around when things are bad? And they can handle it like the same moments. They handle it with care as if things were good.
Yeah, I was with someone yesterday, and I've known them when they're doing really really well, or when they sold their company and probably cashed out with 100 million or more, and they're in a really really tough season right now, and and just showing up for them and just being their friends, and his wife said, yeah, he's like so kind to everyone, but I've been cutting everyone out who I realized was just there for the transactional relationship. And she goes, all I want to make sure he has around him are his friends who love him, whether we're doing well or not doing well. And but it is kind of funny because not doing well is always just a matter of like scale. He goes, yeah, we had to leave our ranch and get a condo. And I'm like, oh dang. And in my mind, I'm going condo, LA, 800 square feet. I'm going, my heart's just broken, man. I'm just going to be there for my buddy. He's in a condo. And then, she goes, if you ever want to stay there, because, we're going to Europe this summer, and here's what it looks like. It's 4,000 square feet
But
condo
my condo is bigger than my entire lot of my house.
overlooking the ocean.
Okay.
and I felt a little better for them, in that moment. But I think it's true, even just in terms of scale, though. You could just feel the emotional strain on his life for
Yeah.
what his year has been like, and he's flooded with friends when things are just rolling, and then you really begin to discover who your friends are.
Yeah. And do you think, because I know who you're talking about. He's a wonderful. They're wonderful people, right? So I this is like no call out. But I think I've been this way. I've never transitioned. I've never downsized from a ranch to a 4,000 square foot condo, and I'm not making fun of it. I just just a little playing a little bit with it. But do you find that? Because of course there's friends who, when you have money, are more around. But do you find that there's just friends that? Because I find that when we go through hard times, oftentimes it's not the people around us that change all that much. It's that we change. So that we
Yes.
feel like we can't put the same, whether it's the front or the same ego or the same image or the same lifestyle. And so we start changing who we feel won't be embarrassed or be asking questions about, what happened? Why is this different? Or why'd you get rid of that car or that house or that, versus just people who want to be around you. And so, yeah, I don't know. How do you be that friend for people? How do you be the friend that people just know, no matter what happens, we're always going to be friends?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's internal, where you think a person who's so successful wouldn't have a self-esteem or identity struggles, but I think sometimes you wonder, would people love me if I didn't always pay for every meal? Would people show up for me if I didn't take care of everything? Would people be my friends if I wasn't the one that was always creating the experience? And I do think that some of it is not just how people treat them, it's how they think about themselves, and they begin to isolate and not feel like they have something to bring to the table anymore. They don't realize that some people actually just like them for them. And I think sometimes that's the greatest discovery in life, is to go, oh wow, there are people who really did and do just like me for who I am. They care about me as a person, and it has nothing to do with my status. And I think that's, but I think you're right. It's sometimes it's the other people, but sometimes it's you just grappling with, do I still have something to contribute?
I think that's a really important detail, and I think it's a really important thing, a parameter, right? Because I think that, like, I know if I go to a dinner, for the most part, I'm paying for dinner. Like, if I say yes to being invited out, I'm paying for dinner, especially during conference week. And I went to a dinner on, I think, the Saturday night, and some people were like, "Come out," and I was like, "Oh man, like there's gonna be a lot of people at this dinner. I don't know if I can. I don't even know if I can afford to be at this dinner right now." And 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 I know I should probably let people pay and do the whole thing, but before I could even, I was exhausted. I was exhausted. I mean, like, the team was going for it. Everyone was working their butts off during those days, especially socially. People are doing what they're doing and then talking to people. And I showed up to the dinner, and one of the boys had already taken care of it, a guy named Kevin. And it was just one of those moments where it's like, man, I didn't ask him to. I was waiting for the bill. I was the closest person to the waiter, and he just somehow figured out a way to sort it out. And I sat there and I was like, man, this is a person who, one, it's not about the monetary value, because no, and sometimes it is, but it really was about the thought and the just the fact that he was willing to just to invest, to go, you know what? And he gave a little speech talking about Mosaic London, and I thought it was awesome. And because we had a whole crew from London, and I feel like if you're here and you spent, all this money to make it to LA to come spend 4 days with us, I want to pay for dinner. I want to take care of dinner. And it was cool to have someone beat me, and then just go like, oh, I know that's a real friend, and that's a friend who, you talk about it a lot. Like, there's people who you have to pay for that don't contribute, and contributing is a part of bonding and attaching to each other, and being all in with each other. And so it's just interesting when you have those moments in life and you see the people who are really there for you. And then also to, like, have those moments of life where you're like, okay, can I really be there for them? And how do I be there for them in the ways that they value, you know? Um, but human nature is just really interesting to me, Dad. It is really, really interesting.
Yeah. It's funny though, is as you grow and you build friendships and you build relationships, um, I don't think I've ever found a level of engagement, whether it's people at the highest level of success, or you know people with celebrity status or whatever it may be. Everybody's going through the same stuff. It's like,
Just real human things.
yeah, it really is. It's just real people dealing with real stuff, and dealing with marriage, dealing with kids, parenting, dealing with how to handle your temper, or how to manage your time. And I do think the difference though is that um, when you are friends with people and interact with people who have a much higher level of responsibility, their margin of error is so thin and so small that they don't have the same level of chill. And a lot of times, because um, you know they don't have as much time to not be productive, and so you find a little different dynamic there. And to me, when then they're willing to like play, hang out, go play paddle tennis or padel or pickleball or basketball, or just go see a movie together or get dinner together, you realize that they're really giving you something incredibly precious. Because when you're just living life, in a very, very safe, comfortable, predictable space, you got a lot of discretionary time. You got a lot of Netflix time. You got a lot of coffee time, chill time. But when you have a very thin margin of error, when you're giving someone like playtime, fun time, friendship time, you're giving them a real gift. And I think that's one of the things I really value. And with some of my friends, like when they call me and go, "Hey, let's all get dinner," I realize, man, they are really carving like you know time that is incredibly valuable to them. There's not a lot of fat on their time.
No.
and so I try to take that very, very seriously and and really treasure that. And on the flip side, I think I'm one of those people. I mean, I probably I have more discretionary time than maybe a lot of those people, but not as much. But you know what drives me crazy when someone calls me and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" Or what are you up to? Or what do you got going this weekend? As if I just have like endless discretionary time. Like I'm just floating through space looking for something to do. And I usually when someone says that to me, I realize we're not even on the same wavelength of the way we live our lives. you know, and if you're not doing anything, do you want to? And I'm like, I'm always doing something. Like there, and and
Yeah,
it's much.
I gotta work to be able to do nothing.
Yeah. And so to me, it's much better to go, I have this opportunity, or would you like to do this? And because for any decision I make, I'm making time. And I think that that's a better way to approach life because I like relating to people who make time to do things together and who are carving time because the relationship matters, the friendship is important. And and I spent the whole day, after Mosaic yesterday, going to a basketball marathon. I went to the Clippers against the Bucks, and I went to the Lakers against um, the Timberwolves, and had dinner with this crew in between, and um, and they flew in just to spend time with me. And because he knows I like sports, he thought, okay, this is how I'll get him to spend time with us, all day. And, and then he wanted to take us, to a jewelry store in Beverly Hills to buy us all a gift. And I'm like, it's okay. We don't have time in between the games to pull that off. And but I just appreciate it so much. The fact that, he thought through, hey, we really want to spend time with Erwin. What's something he would enjoy where, we could, carve that time together. And I just think it's great to have people in your life. And I would just encourage everyone listening to have people in your life, you carve out time for them because they matter that much to you. Just like you would carve out time for the gym, or you would carve out time, for work, or you'd carve out time for learning, carve out time for people.
No, I get that. I get that. I think it's time is one of the greatest gifts, right? Because you can do nothing. Like some of my favorite time I get during the week is when I can do nothing with friends, and it's usually waking up really early and going on a walk, grabbing coffee, going on a walk, and then there's like no money spent, like very little. Like I'm like, man, this is like the joy of $5. Like like this is like more than like dinners or anything. Like, and especially someone who's a single man in his 30s, when someone's like, hey, come over, I'm gonna cook, I'm like, you don't have to ask me twice, man. Austin never invites me over. He always cook all the time. He over there making pizza. He don't invite me over, dog. He
I know
cooks.
I'm begging him to come back, make pizzas, but Austin's just way too busy for us. He's like big time in us now. He's like,
He cooks pizza. Well, he does cook pizza at your house for events. He's like Salt Bay over there with the chili pepper.
yeah, no, he's just cooking with Papa John's now.
No, yeah, no, we're just messing with you. Yeah, but I think time is such a great thing, and I we've been really hitting. And I'm sorry to talk about the arena so much, but it's been on my mind, and just really been thinking about it a lot. But we were talking about our next subject about the Bruce Lee quote. You said that Bruce Lee talks about, I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. And I think it's really interesting, right? Like we talk a lot about discipline and this commitment to your craft and how to be great. But one thing that I've really learned, just from you, like by proxy with this consulting business and getting to spend so much time with so many high level CEOs and founders and fashion designers and coaches, that there's common denominators, right? That's the first step, is do something 10,000 times, become really powerful with one singular thing, and then it grows. And you were talking about it, Dad. You were like, I really committed to speaking, and then I really committed to writing, and then kind of everything else came from that. And I was listening to a really wonderful conversation with Pharrell Williams at Louis Vuitton and Marc Jacobs, who was formerly at Louis Vuitton and was kind of like the godfather of modernizing LVMH into kind of what it is now. And his like his helm when he had the helm as the creative director of Louis. I didn't know this, Dad, but he brought in Pharrell he was like, hey, I like your sunglasses. Let's do something with your sunglasses. And Pharrell was like, you know, I actually was doing this with my friend Naigo, who's a Japanese artist that Pharrell met, and he's like, and he talks about it, he goes, man, it would have been so easy for Mark Jacobs to just go, oh, well, introduce me to Naigo, and I'll cut you out. He's like, oh, cool, bring your friend. Like, I don't care who did what. I just think it's cool. You guys are. There's a creative energy, and I think there's something like so interesting about like this idea because one, Pharrell really praised Marc Jacobs for being the catalyst to bringing young. He didn't even specify young black designers, but that's what he was saying. Like bringing in young guys who were different from a different world, and he talked a lot about being a musician and how he's like music was the skeleton key that opened all of these other doors for me. And I do find that
Wow.
with you, it was speaking and writing. And a lot of these guys have different things that open up other doors for them. But the thing that you keep hitting time and time again is one, have the right people in the room with you and walk through those doors with the right people because those people leave quick when they're the wrong people. This moment, something bad happens. And you've really talked about how character is the thing that keeps you in the doors.
Yeah.
It keeps the doors open. You can be talented, but the character keeps you there.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, when you're saying that, I just saw this progression because if I were like to map out my life progression, I would go. My first commitment was to being, and I made a commitment to be a certain kind of person. I didn't know where my life would go or where it would take me, but I just decided whatever room I was in, I was going to be a certain kind of person. I chose virtues before I chose vision, and and so my first one was being. Then my next one was thinking. I decided that I would discipline myself to become a world class thinker and to think at the highest level possible. And then as I was building thinking, then I made a commitment to speaking. Speaking became my external expression of being and thinking. And I remember being in my 20s saying to myself, I'm going to do the work to be one of the greatest communicators in the world. I'm 24 saying that to myself. I didn't say it to anyone else because it would be arrogant, but I said it to myself. I'm going to become one of the best communicators in the world. And so communicating was next. But next, Aaron, was actually leading. And then I realized, okay, I want to materialize what I'm saying into a culture. And that's where leading became the next stage of my development. And then from leading came writing, because really I wanted to write what I'd experienced, what I'd learned. And then from writing to me, then I moved into what I would call like mentoring and coaching, or in a sense being a sage and building into people at this level. And when you mentioned the arena earlier,
I say high level, high performance coaching, crisis management, and leadership development.
yeah, it's like it's problem solving at the highest level, and like with mind shift, I feel like what we do is we um, like ignite the conversation. We ignite thinking. We ignite the imagination. We're having a conversation, and inviting people into it. But in the arena, it's a space where we're building and mentoring and coaching people at a higher level. And for years and years and years and years, I had people ask me, "Would you mentor me? Would you mentor me? Would you mentor me?" And if there was 1,000, no, I would say if there's 10,000 people who asked me, I was only able to say yes to 10. And I always felt this deep sense of sadness that I couldn't, invest in people at that level. And I realized I always would say to people, "I'm sorry, I don't have the time." But realize what I realized was it wasn't that I didn't have the time; I didn't have the strategy. And then once I had the strategy, then we created the vehicle. And the arena is the vehicle where we can mentor, coach, and build into people on a global level. And the old statement: you can't be 1,000 places at one time, but you can be at one place with 1,000 people. And I think the arena um, is for me the greatest gift that I've ever tried to be a part of, to give to people. And so, now when people go, hey, how can I get coached by you, or how can I get mentored by you, or how can I get you to invest in my life, I'm like, it's really simple. Join the arena. I mean, that's the starting point. And once you dive into the arena, then you can explore other levels of engagement, but it all starts there.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Um, Guys, I think that we've had a wonderful conversation.
I do too. I actually, one, I love that we've spent so much time talking about the importance of relationships today. And because I think that's really, really important. It becomes more important in my life every year. Um, it's kind of strange
What?
because, I'm 65 now. And like growing up, all the pictures of 65-year-olds is that they were all sort of isolated in a retirement home somewhere, you know, and, uh, and I'm going, I cannot believe that at 65, I have more new friendships than I've ever had in my life. I have more exciting um, networks and engagements, and I think the key is if you want your life to keep expanding and growing, then you have to keep expanding and growing as a person,
Mm,
and because your life becomes a reflection of your inner world,
mm,
and as long as I keep growing, and one of the best ways to keep growing is to invest in people.
mm,
And when you invest in people and you care about people, it's amazing how you just keep growing and expanding and developing. And then when you do that, your world just keeps getting bigger. I can't even foresee a time in my life where my world will be smaller than it was before. And
mm.
I just want that for everyone.
It's so good, man. Ah, okay, guys. Well, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. We will see you guys next week. If you guys can take a moment and subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can go to earlmcmanus.com/YouTube. You can also, and that's where Mindshift episodes are hosted. You can also check us out on Instagram, Mindshift Pod, Apple Music, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. And let us know. Write a review, give us 5 stars, leave a comment, leave some comments on YouTube. I'm getting back to them more and more often. But Dad, thank you so much for doing this. I love hanging out with you.
Hey, so good. I'm so glad you're in Miami, connecting with friends.
Yeah,
That's what life's all about.
life is all about. All right, love you guys.
All right, take care.